Hi, I'm Brian Dillon. I am co-founder of Fanbase Press. I also am co-host of the Fanbase Weekly podcast.
My name is Barbara Dillon. I'm the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Fanbase Press, and I am a co-host of the Fanbase Weekly podcast.
I'm Clarissa Thorne. I'm co-host on the Fanbase Weekly podcast.
I'm Drew Siragusa. I'm also a co-host on the Fanbase Press podcast.
Well, on the Fanbase Weekly podcast, we discuss news stories from the week, and specifically news stories that are of interest to the geek world. So we might be discussing the latest rumors about a new movie coming out, or a controversy over who knows what. But usually all things that we're very interested in and that kind of express our love for what's going on in the geek world.
What I would suggest for anyone who's interested in podcasting or improving a podcast that they've started, the big thing that I would focus on is consistency.
If you're wanting to start your podcast, the advice I always give is to be consistent. If you're going to be once a week, you have it every single week. You articulate that you're going to be off.
Sometimes people get so excited about the actual podcast and the content that they don't realize that if you don't keep a consistent schedule, then very often you can't build that audience that you're looking for. If you know that you're releasing whatever it may be, once a week, twice a week, whatever you choose, as long as you stick to that schedule, it allows those who actually enjoy your podcast to know, like, oh, well, I'm going to expect one on Friday, or I'm going to expect one every month. And I think that's really important, because then people know, oh, this is something that's going to be coming in on a regular basis. I can trust that it's going to exist for a while, and they begin to invest personally in what you're putting out there.
Yeah, I don't know. I think for podcasting, I think what's really appealing to people is that you really get down into something very specific that's not necessarily a broad, just talking about whatever is happening kind of, experience, but where you're really talking about something specific. Fanbase Weekly, I think we do that in bringing in various creators and other, independent artists that we talk to, because that's a large part of our conversation is talking about what they're doing, finding out what's going on in the creative geek community. And that takes a little bit of extra effort to go out and have people coming in and scheduling them and, keeping that as just kind of a constant flow of people coming in. And I think that adds a lot of interest.
I think with the finding people coming in, also it helps to find your own voice.
Right.
As the podcast, and then as you as a commentator as well. Create your character. Find out who you are, who you're presenting to the world, and define that. Know who you are. Yeah.
And I think in terms of, there's 4 of us on the Fanbase Weekly, and I think in terms of that, part of that voice that we have is that we are talking about things that people have opinions about, and positive and negative opinions, and things that might be controversial. But part of our voice is that we're not there to tear anything down or be angry or controversial or combative about it, but we're there to really kind of talk about all of the opinions that people have, but do it in a very positive and do it in a way that helps constructively critique things, I think, and that's part of our voice.
I guess one of the best things I can say for starting podcasts is just go and start it. The story I like to tell is when we started, it was a group of us sitting around, and we had one USB Rock Band mic. And you had to raise your hand and pass it around. Right. And then we were like, maybe we should get a couple actual mics. And then it became, well, on our show, we discussed different stories, so we introduce those stories now, because it just kind of started as a conversation. Hey, have you heard this? But now we have it introducing it to the other commentators, the guests, and the audience. So we, just start doing it, and you'll find out what's not working, and then fix those things.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing to keep in mind is, like anything, you can have accidents, and the thing with this is you just kind of have to roll with the punches.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's good to, it's always good to be polite and be respectful of other people when that happens to them, and hopefully they will be polite and respectful to you if you have problems. But mistakes aren't necessarily bad things as long as you learn from them. So if you can, as you're doing the podcast, learn from your failures. If something goes wrong, make sure you don't do it again.
That's a very good life lesson.
I think that an important thing to keep in mind if you are creating your own podcast is planning. Bryant will often recommend consistency, which I think is one of the important facets of planning. But I think that if you create a timeline for yourself, a schedule of what is doable, because above and beyond anything else, it is 100% possible for you to make your own podcast. There are so many wonderful resources out there for you to do so at free or little cost, but the important thing is to be conscious of what your schedule is like, what your resources are like, how much time or effort you are able to put into this. But in keeping all of those things in mind and planning out what is important for you to create for your podcast, I think you will be most successful.